In a first, a Chinese combat drone is spotted encircling Taiwan. The US and the Philippines wrap up their largest joint military drills in decades. Taiwan unveils a plan to spend over $30 million on the country's workforce. Plus,
I'm Liao for TaiwanPlus here in Aohua village in eastern Taiwan's Yilan County. I've got a report for you on how indigenous hunters are reclaiming their rights.
A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Liao. Taiwan's military says a Chinese combat drone has flown around the country's main island. The drone entered the southwestern corner of Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. It then flew up and around to the north of Taiwan. The military says this is the first time a Chinese combat drone has fully encircled the island. 38 Chinese warplanes were also spotted operating around the region in the span of 24 hours. Of those, 19 breached Taiwan's ADIZ. This space is used by the military for security purposes, but isn't part of the country's territory. To better understand the significance of the Chinese incursion into Taiwan's ADIZ, our reporter Jaime Okan spoke to Ben Lewis, an independent defense analyst based in Washington, D.C.
What can you tell us about the significance of this circumnavigational kind of flight path?
What we saw today was, for the first time publicly, the MND tracked a Chinese aircraft circumnavigating Taiwan. It was an unmanned aircraft, a TB-001 UAV, and it flew around over the median line south of Taiwan, around the east of Taiwan, and then to the north, and then back over the median line back to China. So this is something we've never seen before. There was another drone that also kind of did a halfway thing and then came back around. And this is significant because, I mean, like I said, we've never seen it before, but also it's a way for the PLA to test how Taiwan responds to this kind of thing, how the capabilities fare in kind of an extended flight route over water and in a semi-hostile environment. And it's an opportunity then for them to collect intelligence on what's going on the east side of Taiwan using this aircraft.
When then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi came to Taiwan, we saw something of a new normal with China increasing median line incursions. Do you think this circumnavigational flight path is the start of another new normal, or what can we see going forward?
Circumnavigation is something that the PLA is going to want to practice to give their pilots an extended flight time. But there's other considerations to be had. I mean, if you're going to circumnavigate Taiwan, there's a strong chance you're going to need air-to-air refueling. So that expands the operation. So I think the fact that it was an unmanned capability is kind of a signal from Beijing, or at least a desire to keep things relatively stable. So based on what we've seen before, you know, the PLA kind of likes to take it one step at a time. I think it's highly likely that we'll see more drone circumnavigations, and then in the long run, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a manned aircraft circumnavigation, either special mission support or fighter aircraft.
That was Ben Lewis, a defense analyst based in Washington, D.C., speaking to Jaime Okan. A United States military aircraft has flown through the Taiwan Strait. The U.S. Navy confirmed the patrol plane passed over the channel in international airspace on Friday. On the same day, French Senator Alain Richard said a French warship had also recently transited the Taiwan Strait. He made the comments while meeting Taiwan's President Tsai in Taipei. Though Richard did not say when the crossing happened, a French surveillance vessel reportedly sailed through the strait earlier this month. That happened while China was holding 3 days of military drills around Taiwan. The U.S. and the Philippines have finished their largest joint military exercise in decades. This was the first time they held live fire drills at sea. Harrell Hughes has the story.
A decommissioned warship is sunk just off the Philippine coast as part of its yearly exercise with U.S. forces. It's the first time live fire drills were held at sea, capping the Allies' largest drills in decades. Over 2 weeks, some 17,000 troops participated in the joint war games known as Balikatan, or shoulder to shoulder.
What we can say is that the reason we are doing an exercise at this magnitude is because we are exercising or demonstrating our ability to be interoperable with our U.S. counterpart, which is also our treaty ally.
Philippines President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and U.S. Ambassador Mary Kay Loss Carlson watched the maritime maneuvers from Zambales, a province that faces the South China Sea. Since taking office, Marcos has shifted his military focus to these waters, claimed by both the Philippines and China. In the past year, the Philippines has filed more than 200 diplomatic protests against China for repeatedly harassing its Navy, Coast Guard, and fishermen in waters recognized internationally as part of the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. Between April 18th and the 24th, the Philippines Coast Guard spotted more than 100 Chinese militia vessels in the South China Sea. They recorded this encounter with a Chinese ship during a near collision.
This is China Coast Guard Vessel 5201. This is a solemn statement. According to the Chinese laws and the international laws, China has indisputable sovereignty over islands in the South China Sea and their adjacent waters.
In the north of the Philippines, on the islands closest to Taiwan, the military drills took place. They showcased U.S. warships, fighter jets, anti-tank javelins, Patriot missiles, and the U.S. High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, also known as HIMARS. HIMARS is a multi-rocket and missile launcher mounted on a truck for mobility, a crucial weapon used by Ukrainian troops against invading Russian forces. But what the authorities see as vital exercises are not popular with many who live in the Philippines, who also oppose their government's defense agreement, allowing the U.S. troops to rotate into the Philippines and build facilities in several of its military bases.
We would like all peace-loving Filipinos to make a stand to not be one of the countries who are being exploited by the U.S.
But with China increasingly intimidating its neighbors and regional tensions as they are, during this Balakatan, both U.S. and Philippine officials have made it clear that they think peace may only be possible if they are prepared for war. Eason Chen and Harel Hughes for TaiwanPlus.
The head of a French delegation in Taiwan says he believes France would not remain passive if there was a conflict in the Taiwan Strait. Here he is, speaking exclusively to TaiwanPlus.
Bien entendu, je m'exprime avec prudence et avec réserve, puisque je n'ai pas la responsabilité de décider d'une action de la France, mais ma prévision est que s'il y a un déclenchement d'opérations militaires dans le détroit, les États-Unis interviendront et je suis convaincu que nous ne resterons pas inactifs.
Richard is leading the second French parliamentary delegation to visit Taiwan this month. The visits come after controversial comments by French President Emmanuel Macron. He said Europe should not follow the U.S. into a conflict over Taiwan. In the interview with TaiwanPlus, Richard said that Macron's comments had been oversimplified. He said Macron was not speaking about a crisis in the Taiwan Strait, but about general confrontation between China and Europe. Taiwan's economy has entered a technical recession, which means 2 successive quarters of negative growth. Preliminary data shows the economy contracted by just over 3% in the first quarter of the year. The weak results come as demand for Taiwan's exports remain depressed. Exports account for around 70% of Taiwan's GDP. The last time Taiwan's economy was in a technical recession was in late 2015 in the final months of the Ma Ying-jeou administration. The U.S. has labeled Taiwan a hub for illegal video streaming. A new report says apps, web portals, and cable boxes that can unlock copyrighted content are all a problem. Economy Minister Wang Meihua has promised government action. Trade analysts worry digital piracy will get in the way of Taiwan's goal of signing trade deals with the United States.
列为观察名单，都短时间不会就是说受到美国的贸易制裁啦。所以这部分我们现在被提及，大概就是被提醒的意味比较浓厚，它能够衍生成为一个 BTA 甚至 FTA 啦。那所以说这一部分，我相信政府会有一些比较具体的作为才对。
To find out more about illegal video streaming in Taiwan, John Van Trieste spoke to lawyer Chen Yikai.
Many of the countries singled out by the U.S. in this latest report on intellectual property have found that these illegal streaming services are largely used in Asia. Why is that?
可能会认为说，能够不花钱去观看一些影音内容是一件没有错误的事情，这样子。 然后很方便的管道，很低的成本，就可以接触到各种这个未经授权的一个影音内容。但是其实在近年来我们的观察上啊，这刚刚讲到的消费者思维以及这个网络技术发达的因素，其实也渐渐的转向有助于这个正版内容的一个趋势。
Of course, using these illegal streaming sites isn't an organized crime. It's something that individuals do on an individual basis. How can the government find out who's using these services or these illegal cable boxes, and what concrete steps can they take to crack down on this?
检警也会主动的去侦查说一些比较大型的盗版网站，或者是比较流通比较广泛的一些盗版的机上盒 OTT box 这种状况，他都会跟权利人这边密切的配合，然后去主动的去发掘这些盗版网站可能它的伺服器在哪里，也会做这个逮捕啦、起诉啦，然后扣押的这些动作。
Do you think that the current laws have a deterrent effect, or do they need to be strengthened?
我认为这个部分关键不是说要把它关多久或是判得多重，其实关键还是在于它的不法所得，因为毕竟会从事这一类的，它都是属于经济性的犯罪，它的目标最终还是取得经济的利益。
That was John Van Trieste speaking to lawyer Chen Yikai. Taiwan's former President Ma Ying-jeou is in Greece, where he'll give a speech warning of the danger of war in the Taiwan Strait. It's his second major trip this year, following shortly after a historic and controversial visit to China. Our reporter Jeremy Olivier takes a look at the differing reactions to Ma's visit.
A contrast in styles. While Taiwan's current president, Tsai Ing-wen, was visiting the U.S., including a historic meeting with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, her predecessor was in China, here meeting with Beijing's top official for Taiwan affairs. The visits drew international attention, with some arguing they showed competing visions of Taiwan's future, one close to the U.S. and Western democracies, and one closer to Beijing and the Chinese Communist Party. But for Ma and his office, the visit wasn't about choosing sides.
马前总统一直强调中华民国对外大战略其实就是和陆亲美跟友日，那这个是不变的，也就是说他和陆跟亲美这两点是不冲突的。
It's no surprise that Ma Ying-jeou would promote closer relations with China. During his 8 years in office, he oversaw a warming of cross-strait ties. The two sides were at their closest in over 50 years. There were trade agreements, direct flights, and even a historic meeting between Ma and Chinese leader Xi Jinping. But that all changed in 2016 when President Tsai Ing-wen took office. The difference? As president, Ma agreed that Taiwan belonged to one China, but as part of the Republic of China, ruled from Taipei. That was good enough for Beijing, though it insists Taiwan is part of its People's Republic of China. But Tsai says that neither side is subordinate to the other, and does not recognize one China. Since then, China has cut off contact with Taiwan's government, and it's ramped up military activity around the country, while upping threats to use force against Taiwan. Ma is unhappy with the increased tensions in cross-strait politics, and says his trip to China shows a peaceful future is possible. He brought a group of 30 students with him. The hope was that more cross-strait interactions can help rebuild the strained relationship. One of the students told TaiwanPlus that she was impressed with the people she met.
I think they are very intelligent and they are very cautious. At the same time, when I communicate with them, their attitude to Taiwan is very friendly because they know Taiwan very well. Because most of them, they are professional bureaucrats, and then they're doing cross-strait relations affairs for maybe 1 or 2 decades.
But many criticize Ma's decision to go to China at a time of heightened Chinese military activity around Taiwan. Taiwan's ruling party says it undermines efforts to build support for the country.
我想，当全球都在关注台湾受到中国的武力威胁跟各种恐吓的时候，那甚至其他的国家都在关注以及跟台湾建立友谊的时候，马英九前总统这次的访中，他会对国外的整个国际社会释放出错误的讯息。
Ma's office told TaiwanPlus that it believes the responsibility for better relations with Beijing lies with Taiwan's ruling party. For its part, the government says Taiwanese people support its stance on cross-strait ties. with over 80% of respondents to a government poll agreeing that the two sides are not subordinate to one another. Ma's trip shows there's still a way for Taiwan and China to get along. But in a world where one China seems increasingly unrealistic, the Taiwanese people may not be willing to follow his lead. Rick E., Sam Hui, Ed Moon, and Jeremy Olivier for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, astronomers capture a groundbreaking image of a black hole. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Pooja Bhamra, and I'm here to take you guys on an adventure of your lifetime. When the country so beautifully encapsulates everything within it, be it their food, their traditions, their arts and crafts, you've got to see it to believe it. Well, welcome to Love Fun Taiwan.
Every Sunday, 7:30 p.m. on TaiwanPlus.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. For decades, Taiwan's strict hunting laws have put indigenous hunters at odds with the government. Rick Liao reports on a new arrangement which hopes to empower indigenous communities and reduce conflict.
29-year-old Jun Mao is back on the hunt. It's been a while since he's felt free to do so without risking a clash with the law.
因为像小偷一样，小偷一样上山，然后下山了又像小偷一样回家，就是要注意警察，担心警察，这当然会有一些影响。但现在就是不用怕，就直接光明正大拿着枪上山，又拿着枪猎物回来。
Jun Mao is Daya, an indigenous group in eastern Taiwan. Hunters in his village are part of a pilot government project that lets indigenous communities, rather than authorities, manage parts of the woodland, including implementing Taiwan's strict hunting laws. In 1989, Taiwan put in laws to prevent overhunting and protect the country's wildlife, legislating that hunters must use registered homemade weapons and notify authorities on what they plan to shoot. The law is unpopular with indigenous communities, who say their own customs and respect for nature prevent overhunting. 60% of Taiwan is covered in mountainous forest. Most of it is government land, and it's close to these areas that indigenous people live. Each year, there are hundreds of cases of indigenous hunters running foul of Taiwan law. Indigenous communities make up just 2.3% of the country's population and have faced years of discrimination. Taiwan's government says hunting laws fulfill its obligation to protect the environment, but indigenous communities maintain they have a constitutional right to practice their culture.
那你如果不让他们打猎的时候呢，这个东西就变成说，这种训练方式、这种训练的一个过程就会断掉了。那所以我们的男人可能就男孩子可能就无法从这边学到一些传统的一些习惯一些技能。那所以虽然国家禁止，他还是要去打猎。所以呢就会产生这样一个冲突。
And that's why Taiwan's Forestry Bureau is now trying to co-manage the forest with indigenous communities in a bid to bridge that divide while keeping the law.
黄鼠狼，然后山羌、山羊、跟雉鸡还有猴子。
Here, local hunters can themselves regulate the use of weapons and monitor wildlife levels.
透过猎人组织，跟作为政府跟个别的猎人，它变成是一个很重要的一个中介的这个组织，然后猎人组织呢也可以知道说，政府是愿意相信他们去支持他们。那这些个别的猎人，他们透过这样的方式，他们也会慢慢信赖政府。那进一步的，其实猎人本身就是一个很好的自然资源的管理者，因为他对于野外的生态很了解，那他也很了解动物的习性。
A minority in their own homeland, Taiwan's indigenous people have been struggling to protect their cultures and traditions. Now, communities like the Daya are showing how the original inhabitants of this land are best placed to tend to it. Leon Lien and Rick Liao for TaiwanPlus.
South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol has met with U.S. defense officials at the Pentagon. Yoon is on a 6-day visit to the U.S. aimed at enhancing defense ties. He met with U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin on Friday. They reportedly discussed ways to boost deterrence capabilities while facing increased aggression from North Korea. For more on the South Korean president's trip to the United States, our reporter Jaime Okan spoke to Yoon Jung-cho, security correspondent for Voice of America.
President Yoon and U.S. President Joe Biden recently signed this nuclear deterrence agreement and the decision to station submarines near the Korean Peninsula. Are there any other highlights or any key takeaways from his visit in D.C.?
Now, his trip is very important both for Washington and for Seoul because this year marks the 70th anniversary of the US-RK very successful alliance that was forged in blood during the Korean War, now evolving into economic alliance and high-tech alliance. As you mentioned, there was an announcement of Washington Declaration, which include a series of measures to give South Korea more assurance that the U.S. will respond aggressively in the event of a nuclear attack by North Korea. Now, the important element of the Washington Declaration is the launch of a nuclear consultative group, which gives Seoul more voice in the U.S. nuclear planning and execution.
And are there any conversations right now in South Korea about what a Taiwan conflict, what effects that would have on South Korea?
So Taiwan contingency would be an Asia war, and South Korea would be directly impacted. Now, the biggest risk there is that North Korea may act opportunistically and attack South Korea in the case of a Taiwan contingency. So the big question for South Koreans is to whether to send its own troops to Taiwan to help with Taiwan and with the United States, which is South Korea's ally. And I have asked same question to former U.S. officials here, whether U.S. would want South Korea to send its forces to help with Taiwan. And many people actually tell me that it's better for South Korean forces and U.S. forces Korea to stay on the Korean Peninsula because, as I said, there is a high chance that North Korea may act opportunistically and attack South Korea in the case of a Taiwan contingency.
Taiwan is offering 20,000 workers incentives through a new subsidy program. The government hopes it will get more people into the workforce. However, not everyone is convinced by the idea. Bing Wang reports.
Taiwan's workforce is getting a boost. The Labor Ministry has pledged $32.5 million to help ease the labor shortage post-pandemic. The program hopes to recruit 20,000 workers by paying them directly, giving workers over the age of 45 an extra $325 per month, while those aged 45 and lower will receive an extra $200 monthly. The program will last for 1 year. The government will also provide subsidies for companies to train new workers. Subsidies will also go towards upgrading equipment, providing for safer working environments. But there are those who feel this won't provide a permanent solution to the country's labor shortage.
本来假设这雇主本来给我3万，那你雇政府就给我加了1万，所以4万块，那我愿意进来。就等到补贴期满的时候，如果雇主在这段时间没给我加薪，那我又回到3万，那我可能又离开了，会变成短期的效果。
The government insists the plan will work and get older people back into the workforce. Taiwan's economy has contracted for the 5th straight month. The government attributes that to a decrease in global demand of goods and a lack of workers. Officials hope their planned subsidies will help people find jobs and lift the economy. Klein Wang and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
A transnational group of astronomers has captured a historic image of a black hole. The breakthrough was made possible by a telescope built in collaboration with Taiwan-based experts at Academia Sinica. For more, Joyce Zeng spoke to the scientists.
What you're seeing now is the first ever image of a black hole and a jet flow, captured at the same time. It's been photographed from the Messier 87 or M87 galaxy, which is more than 50 million light-years away from Earth. Astronomers have known that black holes expel jets of energy for a while now, but have never managed to capture an image. According to Taipei-based Professor Asada Keiichi, one of the leaders in the discovery, this new photograph gives a key clue in figuring out how these jet flows happen.
That's what has been mystery for the 100 years. The core, which is like a most brightest component we saw, is like just one blob. But thanks to the Greenland telescope and ALMA, and it turns out it's become like a ring-like structure.
Learning about the structure of black holes provides a fuller image of the nuclei, the central engine of the entire galaxy. The jet flow captured in the historic image is about 6,000 light-years in length, which Asada says is tiny in the grand scheme of the galaxy. But the discovery is still an immense step forward for astronomers. The project has taken 7 years and an international team of experts, including Asada and his researchers at Taiwan's Academia Sinica. Out of the global network of telescopes used, Taiwan manned 2 of them, including the Greenland telescope, one of the 3 that ended up capturing the image.
That telescope was built by our institute and the U.S. Smithsonian Observatory. With this addition of the Greenland telescope into the global array, that makes the image more sharper than before.
And this is just the beginning.
This Nature paper, without any contribution from Taiwan, it cannot be happened. We already started new observations starting from this April, and now they are embarked. We are remotely operating the Greenland telescope from here.
The breakthrough is another milestone in the study of the universe, building on the work of scientific greats like Albert Einstein and Stephen Hawking. As astronomers worldwide dive deeper into the galaxy's core, experts like Asada and Huang are at the forefront of unlocking its secrets. James Lin and Joyce Zhen for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally today, we leave you with images of dogs preparing for the annual Westminster Dog Show in New York City. Who's a good dog? I'm Liao. Take care and see you next time.